then move on down and ignore everything else that deals with the rods because it's not what you have. Okay? So once I have a sphere, the next test is catalase. Catalase also gives you an instantaneous result. Okay? Remember, this is where you're adding hydrogen peroxide to your organism, looking for whether or not it helps. So let's say I do a catalase and test positive. The next test I run into is a glucose fermentation in a phenol red broth. Okay? Now this test requires an overnight incubation. Remember, we're only doing this for 2 days. So what that means is as soon as you run into a test that requires an overnight incubation, every other test beneath it has to be done as well. Okay? Because we only have 2 days to do this. So all of those other tests need to be performed and then incubated overnight. Come back the next class, and all you're going to do is score each of those tests and follow down the line. Okay? Make sure you do it all the first day. Okay? If it requires an overnight incubation, it needs to be done the first day. Otherwise, it will take more than 2 days, and that doesn't work very well. Okay? So, any questions on the key and how this will work? Okay. If you run into something and you notice that we don't have any of the reagents up at the front, that means you've taken a wrong turn. Go back and think about what you did. Okay? I am willing to help you, okay, but I'm not going to tell you whether or not you were right or wrong. Okay? Part of this process is to trust your gut and try to identify something without knowing anything about it. Okay? Also, you're allowed to use your lab notebook. You're allowed to use the internet. You're allowed to use anything but your lab partners. Okay? It's designed to be an independent project. Now, with that said, it doesn't mean you guys can't chat or talk or do whatever else. Just don't talk about the project directly. Okay? One other thing that I would recommend you guys do from now up until the first day of the Unknown project is if you look at the key, it tells you what the name of the test is, but it doesn't tell you where it is in the lab notebook. Okay? So what I would recommend doing beforehand is just going through your lab notebook, finding each one of these tests, and then write the page number next to it. That way when you come in, you run into that test, you just go, oh, it's page 70 whatever, open it up, and that's what you go with. Okay? So I would definitely recommend doing that. I don't mind helping you, but I will not tell you where it is in the lab notebook. It's something you should be able to figure out on your own. Okay? So that's the key. Now how am I going to grade you on this? Okay? I do keep an eye on what you guys are doing during the lab, and unless you do something really, really bad or wrong, I'm not going to take points off for what you're doing in the lab. Okay? The big things that I'm going to look for is whether or not you're talking to lab partners to get help. I won't say a word, okay? I won't acknowledge it, but I will take notes, okay? So don't do it. Also, what I'm going to look for is if you do anything dangerous, right? So if you burn yourself or you put glass in the wrong place back there or something like that. You'd be surprised how many people do that at the end of the semester. They take their tube with their number on it and they stick it in the wrong waste container. I go back there and I look and I go, oh, this number is this person. They just did something wrong, right? And I take points off. So try to just, follow the basic rules. But other than that, I'm not going to, ding you for anything too crazy, okay? What I'm primarily going to be grading is a lab report, okay? The lab report is basic, 1 to 2 pages, relatively simple, and will be due the very last day of class, okay? So it's due the day of the final. The lab report is structured just like a basic scientific lab report. It's got 4 sections: the introduction, methods, results, and the discussion. Okay? The introduction is about a 1 to 2 paragraph intro, and this is where you're going to introduce the problem that you have come into. Okay? Now you can be boring and say, I got a tube from my professor and I need to identify what the organism is, or you can get creative here and come up with some crazy clinical story about so-and-so's vaginal infection. By all means, have fun. It just depends on what you guys want to do. Okay? The next section is the methods, and this is where you're going to describe what you actually did in class. Okay? In this portion, what I'm looking for is for you to describe only the tests that were utilized for the identification of the organism. Okay? Remember earlier I told you that if you run into something that requires an overnight incubation, you've got to do everything underneath it. But you're not going to use all of that for the identification. Okay? So make sure when you are identifying your organism, you circle the tests you use, and those are the only ones you're going to talk about. That's how we'll be able to understand your thought process and what you did. Okay? In the method section, you're just going to briefly describe what you did for each task. 1 to 2 sentences for each thing. Do not go crazy. I don't even know you held the loop in the flame for 33 seconds and then added water. Don't go into that kind of crazy stuff, right? Just say, I heat fixed my organism to a slide, and then I stained with crystal violet, followed by this, that, and that, okay? Very basic, 1 to 2 sentences for each test. Next, the results section. This is where you go through, and for each test, you describe your results that you saw, right? So I did a gram stain, and it was, purple, so it's gram positive, and it was a cockeye, right? Kind of matter of fact. Don't list things, though. This is all has to be done in paragraph form. Okay? I don't want to see lists. You can put a table in if you want, but make sure you describe what the table is. And then lastly, the discussion. And the discussion is where you are going to kind of summarize everything, right? So my organism is gram positive, it is a cockeye, it's oxidase positive, it's, glucose fermenter, and so that means it's this organism. Now I would also like you to look up a little bit of information about your organism and understand why those things mean it's what it is, okay? Don't just say I looked at my key and it told me that's what it was, okay? Also, if you came up with, a good story in the front end during the intro, this is where you would wrap it up. Say, Mary had chlamydia and I treated her with this, that, or the other. Okay? But again, only 1 to 2 paragraphs, not too crazy. Okay? You don't need references. Just don't give me bullshit because I can tell a mile away. Okay? Any questions? Yes.
If you have something that's a biohazard in glass, you dump it in the biohazard waste basket or in the glass waste basket?
If it's glass and a biohazard, there's 2 types of glass that we have. If it's a test tube, it goes in the test tube rack. If it's a slide, it goes in the loose slide beaker. Okay? Other than that, there shouldn't be anything glass that has biohazardous material on it. Any other questions? It's really not that bad. Everyone feels that way in the beginning, and once they do it, it's fun. They all say, wow, that was a lot easier than I thought. Although I would say about 50 to 60% of the students get their identification wrong. But they still can get it, you can still get a B. I'm not going to fail you if you get the ID wrong, right? As long as what you did throughout the process makes sense, you'll be okay, right? That's why I make you do a lab report. Also, I'm required to give you guys some sort of writing to do, because they periodically ask us to submit writing samples from all of the students.
You submitted from last semester.
Change all the names.
I mean, Julie.
Alrighty, so that's it. Any questions on the unknown project other than that?
Hey, sir, real quick. Okay.
Yes.
So we do 5 tests, but only if 3 of them help us identify. Those are the ones we talk about.
Those are the ones you talked about, right? The other 2, just throw them away. Don't think about them. Don't look at them. They were just done so that you didn't waste a bunch of days doing
Oh,
them.
okay.
Okay?
How many points is having the right answer worth?
Once out of 30.
Oh, hell.
That's not the name of the game here. It's to show, to show me that you guys are doing the right things, right? Because you could make, one little simple mistake in the beginning, but then everything else is exactly how it should have been if you were, going that direction. So I'm not going to penalize you to, crazy with that. However, most of the time when people get it wrong, there's also other problems with the paper. So usually you use 5 points. That's what I'm saying.
That's a lot.
But there are cases where people have perfect papers, get it wrong, they get a 28 out of 30, which is completely fine. I think you guys can manage that. Okay? Any other questions? All right, let's go downstairs.